Welcome to Uncommons. I'm Nate Erskine-Smith, and on this episode I'm joined by Conservative colleague Arnold Viersen. He's the Member of Parliament for the Alberta riding of Peace River Westlock. Now, Arnold and I have actually had the opportunity to work closely together at committee. He's been a long-standing advocate for protecting people from exploitation on porn platforms, specifically Pornhub and MindGeek, now parent company ILO. I moved a motion along similar lines, and we ended up working together at committee, specifically around instances where individuals have their images or video of them used without their consent. It's horrific, and it's got to stop. Now, Arnold has a bill, and this is why I invited him on the podcast to begin with, Bill C-270, to address some of these things, and that flowed out of some of that committee work. I also asked Arnold questions after the first 25 or so minutes of our conversation about his social conservative advocacy. And specifically, and I was probably too insistent on this point, some questions around his protection for the preborn. He introduced a petition earlier this month to better protect the preborn, but he's got a long-standing history of advocacy on this front. Now, in fairness to Arnold, and I want to read this email because, in the interest of transparency, Nate, I felt a bunch ambushed. I agreed to come on your show to talk about C-270. There were many more things I was hoping to reminisce about, some of the ethics committee stuff, and the murky org structure of ILO MindGeek. That was not a good faith discussion. I emailed him back to say, yeah, I should have gone further into the MindGeek discussion. Agreed. I didn't mean to dwell as much on the abortion piece, but you left it hanging more than I thought you would. Let me listen to it before we publish, as I don't want you feeling ambushed. And he concluded, regardless, I would not have come on your show. I came to talk about C-270. There was a lot more to talk about. Now, I don't want guests feeling ambushed. I've never had a guest who felt ambushed and who responded by way of an email like that. I'm not going to edit this. I'm not going to edit it down. I'm not going to change it in any way. You be the judge. Maybe I went at Arnold too hard. I think it's all fair game in a way, but you be the judge. Arnold, thanks so much for joining me.
Well, I thought I should let you know right off the top here that I'm not sure if I got paid a compliment or not, but yesterday at committee, when they came to hand out the names and put my name card down, they put your name in front of me.
Well, we're both losing our hair.
Yeah.
We
shave often
are
enough.
Around the same age. We are both poor at shaving. Although I think you're trying to grow a mustache. That's probably where most of the similarities are. You got 6 kids, I've got 2. I assume you're an Oilers fan.
Yeah, I'm from that neck of the woods, so yes, I'm an Oilers fan.
I was expecting a bit more of an impassioned defense of the Oilers, given where they are in the playoffs, but that's okay. So you, I want to get into a little bit how about you got involved in politics in the first place, but I think where it makes sense to start is there is a lot of common ground in some of the work we've done, not all of the work, but some of the work, and that's around the exploitation of people on certain platforms, in particular Pornhub and MindGeek. And you've been at this for quite some time, and I'm interested in hearing about sort of how you came to this and how you started with this. But I mean, I came to it just by virtue of following the media and then quite frustrated that there wasn't accountability and attention on it. And I brought a motion at the privacy committee, and then we worked together on that study. How did you come to that issue?
Yeah, that's so you and I got elected back in 2015, same time. I had the good fortune of winning the lottery for the private members bills. So I was number 37 in that first parliament that we were elected, and I'm an auto mechanic from Northern Alberta. I didn't even know what a private members bill was or private members business was, right? So that the whole country shows up to like, hey, you got a private members spot. Like, here's my bill. Run with this, right? So as you can imagine, kind of a deluge of ideas showed up, and I remember. So there's kind of 2 things that brought me here. Do you remember the Rehtaeh Parsons story?
Yeah.
You have a 14-year-old girl committed suicide on the East Coast. And when that happened in 2013. I had a 1-year-old daughter at home. And that story really struck me. And I always thought why did that, she was like, Rehtaeh Parsons was raped at a party. The boys that did that posted it on their Facebook page. Like, they were pretty proud of this thing, right? And that always just haunted me. Like, why would they think this is something that was normal enough that they would brag about, so to speak? And so that was like a motivator for me. But I didn't necessarily connect the two right away. And then when you're trying to pick your private members bill, I had a whole series of issues, and that was just one of the issues that I wanted to tackle. And I really made the connection between the rampant pornography use in Canada and the rape culture that, at the time, that's not even necessarily such a term anymore. But back in 2015, rape culture was a term that was being thrown about, and I made the connection to say, like, well, if this is what kids are watching all day long, it's no wonder that they're bragging about it in their Facebook page. But that didn't necessarily lead me to the private members motion that I ended up putting on. I remember I narrowed the issues down to 12 issues, and it was like just 12, yeah. And I was having trouble to figure out which one to go with. And believe me, Nate, most of the other issues you and I would not have agreed on at all. So like,
but the vote was unanimous on it. Like, you brought a motion that ultimately got supported for a study at the health committee.
Yeah. So that's the story of how I got there was I had a list, and I had a good friend who lived in northern BC, and I phoned him up and I said, hey, I got this problem. I got all these good ideas, and I can only pick one of them. And so you're going to help me pick it. And so his criteria was, how many other MPs would do would bring that issue forward, so to speak, right? So I like firearms. He's like, there's probably 30 or 40 MPs that would do something on firearms. I'm like, defensive pipelines. He's like, there's 100 MPs that would do it on that, right? And so then I got to like the tackle pornography use in Canada. And he says, Arnold, I don't think any other MP would even have that on their list. So that's going to be the one you're going to have to do. And so that's how we ended up doing M47 and tackling.
And fast forward, so you got M47. It instructs the health committee to examine the public health effects of the ease of access and viewing of online violent and degrading sexually explicit material on children, women, and men. That passes. Yeah. There's a study at the health committee. It doesn't sound like, I'm not so in the weeds on that committee report, but it doesn't sound like much comes out of that, all things considered. But then we have a study at the Privacy and Ethics Committee, and the testimony is incredibly hard to listen to at times. Women who have been exploited on the Pornhub MindGate platform, and people who, and just so listeners are clear, these are people who were not consenting in any way whatsoever to have their images and the video content shared on this platform. And they were raising concerns, and Pornhub MindGeek was not responding in any serious way. And we sort of tore them a new one at committee, and you guys continue that study in a more serious way. And your bill now, C270, flows, I think, directly out of that study.
Yeah, it basically answers like recommendations 9 to 14 out of that study. My bill fulfills what was recommended to do out of that study, for sure. Yeah, I don't know. And if we just back up a bit, like there's like two pieces that I think precipitated the article that happened in the New York Times that then brought this whole thing to the fore, and that was in this. Like a year earlier, or almost I think it was like 10 months earlier, we wrote a letter that was signed by, I think, 7 members of parliament. We wrote a letter to the prime minister saying, hey, like, this is a big problem. And then in like just a week prior, so I never asked Nicholas if our letter had precipitated his article or not, but we wrote 75 MPs, probably yourself included, signed a letter to the justice minister, like, again, pointing out these non-consensual images that are appearing on Pornhub and the lives that have been destroyed. So like like it wasn't just like all of a sudden this happened. We were pushing it pretty hard to try to bring it to the Canadian consciousness. And I guess we'll never really know why it also became the thing, but it was suddenly the work that we'd been doing for about 5 years, trying to get the Canadian population to focus on this issue. Suddenly it was the issue of the day. And
the media, to their credit, really pursued MindGeek and Pornhub in a serious way. And at committee, we weren't getting answers, and it showed. And I think we played an accountability function. And your bill, walk us through it. So C-270 is focused on addressing non-consensual images and protecting people under the age.
Yeah. So currently, the Canadian law for quite a while already, I think since 2011, has protected folks from their images appearing online without their consent. So non-consensual sharing of non-consensual images has, like, revenge porn is kind of been the term that's been used around that. So that's been illegal for quite a while. Underage images have been illegal forever, and but what we discovered is, and the police told us this, is that it's like impossible to prosecute because, like, the very young stuff is reasonably easy to prosecute, but the in between age, the girls, Serena Filitis, the girls that came forward at committee to tell us their story, 14, 15 years old, that age is hard to prosecute because the police have to prove the identity of the person in the video and the age of the person in the video. So my bill, what it would do, it would reverse the onus. Essentially, it would say, if you're posting a video, you got to maintain the records of the age and the consent of the individuals appearing in the video. And if you don't do that, you will violate the criminal code, and you could be fined up to $500,000 or spend a year in jail. And so that would allow, based on the complaint, the police could go to one of the platforms and say, hey, where's your records for this video? And if they fail to maintain the records, they would be charged with a crime under the criminal code. And so that's essentially the reverse onus that happens. And instead of the police having to prove the age and the consent of the individuals, the companies would have to prove that. So the key point of the bill is that this only affects those that are pursuing a commercial purpose around the sharing of images.
And this isn't the only bill. I mean, I'm sure there are some amendments to come, and maybe there are some specific changes to particular elements of the language. When I've heard the government speak to it in the House, they suggest some amendments are required. But in principle, the reason it passed second reading is because the principle of it is to require, as you say, creators of the materials to verify and keep records of the ages and informed consent. And who's going to argue with that idea? Now, it's not the only bill, though, that deals with pornography in the House of Commons right now. There's a bill, I think it's being studied at committee right now, and it's an age verification bill that came out of the Senate. You're involved with that as well?
So I know Senator Maville Deschênes, who's the mover of it in the Senate. I sit with her on the All-Party Group to End Human Trafficking and Modern Day Slavery. We're both co-chairs from there. And so I've definitely... she has definitely bounced a lot of the ideas off of me around the tackling of the age verification. That bill is kind of modeled after a whole series of bills that have been passed around the world. I think 6 or 7 American states have passed similar legislation. France and Germany have recently passed similar legislation. England was actually the first. Probably about a decade ago already, they were pursuing this. About, like, when I got elected, they were pursuing that, but it's kind of all stalled in England. But they were kind of the first movers on it. But yeah,
what do you make? I haven't gone down the rabbit hole on this.
Yeah.
What do you make of Michael Geist, a privacy expert? I was reading his review of the bill, and he says it's the most dangerous Canadian bill you've never heard of. And he says by bringing together website blocking, face recognition technologies, and stunning overbreadth, his words, that would capture numerous mainstream services, so not just commercial pornography. He says the bill isn't just a slippery slope, it's an avalanche. So, Texas is one of the states that passed, but then the court struck it down, that law down around privacy considerations. How do you balance the need for age verification at the same time as you want to protect people's privacy, adults accessing pornography?
Yeah. I guess I would just point to, first of all, sometimes I don't think he's read the bill. Like, we put in 4 principles around age verification. We're adamant about age verification, not identity. You do not need to be ID'd. You need to be, your age has to be verified. And we're not real prescriptive on that. Mostly because we have archaic pieces of the law. For example, the copyright of which protects the software on your cell phone, your iPhone. The piece of law that they use to do that talks about compact discs, right? Because that's how they wrote the law, and so they've kind of argued their way from compact discs to your iPhone, and that's how they're protecting it. And so we didn't want to put a particular technology in the law because that it probably won't age well, given the fact that over time we'll be able to. So we just put in 4 principles in the bill on what age verification has to look like. Now, interestingly, for tobacco sales, for alcohol sales, for online gambling, these mechanisms already exist for all 3 of those. There's 10 companies in Ontario that do age verification for online gambling, for example. And I don't know. I don't see the great leap from that to online pornography. The other thing is the technology, I imagine, is something like CAPTCHA. We all use CAPTCHA every day when you're moving around the internet, and that's a human verifier. It doesn't ID you. It asks you to click on all the pictures with bikes in it, for example. The method of doing that IDs you as being a human being. And I imagine they will come up with something that will be able to verify your age, similar to that. Google already likes to brag to me that they can tell the age of their users based on the way they use the device, what apps they have on a device, how they type, all these kinds of things. They say we can guess within 3 months of the actual age of a person what their age is, right? And so without actually identifying who you are, they're like, we don't know who that person is, but we can tell you the way that they're using a device, or their apps that they're using, or the way that they type. We can tell you within 3 months how old they are. And so there is a whole bunch of things that they could do to identify, or not identify, but verify.
Can I ask on procedure? So I've read that there are amendments that probably would be forthcoming, but aren't forthcoming because there's a filibuster at committee. And for those who don't understand how that works, there's a certain allotted period of time before committee has to report back to the House. And if there's a filibuster and amendments can't be made, then it just gets reported back as is. Emily Laidlaw is an expert in this space, and she had an interesting article. I don't know if you read it. It was online age verification is crucial, and Bill S10 gets it wrong. Was how she had 4 recommendations for changing, and they weren't. It wasn't to overhaul the bill in any, I don't think, substantive way. It was changes that would have fixed some of the concerns that people have. But if a filibuster is going on, it doesn't get amended, and if it doesn't get amended, then doesn't that render it? Isn't that going to make it given a harder time to pass if the Liberals and the NDP and the Bloc look at it and say we don't necessarily want to pass it in this manner?
Yeah. I guess we'll have to wait and see how it all plays out. That like, I'm following it as closely as you are, and we'll see, I guess, how it all lands and where it plays out. There's lots of other pieces flying around at the committee as well. So,
can I ask? So you've been involved. Obviously, you got M47, and that's addressing this issue. You've been involved in S10 by virtue of working with the senator and being involved in that all-party caucus. You've obviously got C270, which is the most recent legislative initiative. Is it do you draw a distinction between exploitation, non-consensual image sharing, kids' images being used on platforms and people being violated because they haven't consented, versus pornography in general? Or are you concerned with pornography in general?
So I'm probably a moving target on that to some degree. I came to it through the Rehtaeh Parsons story, and there is like and what is driving the rape culture and the relationships between men and women and all that. So I think there is something there that I say I think there's a challenge that we have with the pornography world as it is today. That is still different than, I don't think that's a criminal aspect that we need to go after. That's a cultural thing that we need to be concerned about. Much like cigarette smoking or something like that, right? Where we said these are like the societal ills that are coming out of this, but we didn't criminalize smoking, for example. And so I think the case of Rehtaeh Parsons, I think, is an example of some of the societal ills that are being driven by excess or the pornography use or the pornography industry that was in effect at the time. Pornhub, I think, is subsequent to the ethics committee study. I think they pulled down like 100,000 videos or something like that. Like 70% of their content, they took it down because they couldn't verify the age or consent of individuals. And I hope that just like cleans it up significantly. So that's I guess the general target around the pornography piece. I think I came at it through the pornography piece, but I would say that it probably shifting away from just the pornography piece and more to, I don't know if you were able to take in, we had somebody hosted Baroness Beeben. Maybe that was you.
I hosted Beeben Kidron and yeah.
Yeah, and so I took that presentation, and then I think that's probably where I'm headed more than just the pornography tackle. Is that like our children are lonelier, more depressed, unable to function in society than ever before, and there's like some significant trends that all the trend lines shift at 2007. And in 2007, we got YouTube and the iPhone, and how do we like what is the thing that changed? Well, we know what the thing is changed there is, but the social ramifications of that. How do we as legislators? How do we tackle that? Her age assurance model is fascinating. Tackling the like, how do we tackle the cumulative effects of all these online platforms that regulate our life today? You can go after all the individual platforms, but it's not the individual platforms that are the problem. It's the whole world of it that's causing the fraying of our social fabric, I suppose.
Do you see a challenge though? I mean, Pierre Poilievre was out there calling the online harms bill censorship before he saw it, and we could debate certain elements of it, I'm sure, but the thrust of it, I mean, age-appropriate design code is part of that, and that's built on the UK's work and Baroness Kidron's work, and you've got real focus on algorithmic accountability and transparency, and mitigating the harms associated with requiring audits effectively of what are these algorithms doing, and are there harms associated with, and how do you mitigate those harms? Do you see good in that bill as a result, given that focus?
Yeah, so like it was, from my perspective, what's been fascinating about it is like twice there's been like a consultative group put together to try to draft a online harms bill, and twice they've all resigned. precisely because, and they said this precisely because the the bill's trying to mash too many things together, right? The three pronged approach of Bill C-63 puts good and bad, things I can support with things I can't support. And so that's the challenge. If it was narrowly focused on the like I perhaps I would say like the entire premise that from which it starts is maybe the wrong. Like I would, if I was drafting the bill, I would start from a completely different premise. I would probably start with the criminal code and work my way out. And yet, like a 24-hour takedown, I'm not excited about that. That's like we want to prevent this stuff from ending up on the internet, not trying to take it down 24 hours after it happens, right? So that whole, but like I appreciate the bill and the fact that we're talking about it, right?
Right.
This bill was 3 years in the making, right? Like after the Pornhub study, they said within 30 days we'll have a bill on it, and then we waited 3 years for it. So I think there's going to be a bunch of flux and spitballing around it for sure. And
you know what would be interesting? I know it's not going to happen, but how I wish Parliament worked sometimes would be a bill like that gets supported in the same way your bill got supported in all-party way, and we said we don't agree with all that is in there. Some of it needs to be amended, but we're going to get it to committee. It would be nice with a bill like that, where we all want to address online safety and online harms, but respect free speech in the process and freedom of expression. I mean, get it to committee, hear experts, and if we can't get it in a way that we all agree on, then vote it down at third reading. But at least let's have a thoughtful conversation about different provisions at committee. But that is not the way Parliament necessarily works.
Maybe or maybe not. Like I think that still is how Parliament works. Just you got to stretch out the time scale a little bit further, right? Like it may end up being that you zoom in this direction for a bit, it crashes and burns, then it tries in this direction for a bit, right? Like like that's that. Like we're just impatient people and want it to happen in a minute, right? But I guess I've been beating this drum since 2015, and like for 5 years, like nothing, right? Like it wasn't until the New York Times article that all of a sudden the country cared, right? But prior to that,
the doors open a little bit.
Yeah.
Can I ask about a different? Can I ask about a different long game? This is, I mean, I know. I read your sort of background enough to, you bring. I'm not a religious person. We probably have shared values in many ways, but not on everything. And your religious background obviously drove you to be concerned about some issues over others. And you have been one of the more vocal members of Parliament. You're part of the pro-life caucus. You are. I think you got given a rough ride recently in some quarters, but probably got a lot of positive accolades in your community or the pro-life community. When you introduced a petition recently, I think, what was the petition? Oh, it was around calling to strengthen protections for preborn in Canada. You said at the rally outside when you were calling for signatures for the petition, we are called to protect the dignity of life from conception to natural death. You obviously are part of a caucus where the leader is saying, we're not going to legislate on this. I don't want anything to do with this. This is a long game. You're in it for the long haul on addressing pornography and harms. You're in it for the long haul on protecting the preborn.
Yeah. So I in a similar fashion, I think that the cultural shift probably will happen before the legal shift happens, right? That's the reality. Is the humanity of the preborn is a thing, and in like many other, I like when you often hear pro-lifers say we want to make abortion unthinkable. That's the reality, is that we want our country to be in a position where nobody ever needs to have an abortion, that we have solid families that want to have children that are that like that's a pipe dream for sure. Like we live in a fallen world, but that is the dream and hope.
What does a dream look like, though? So it's one thing to say we hope to be in some. I mean, it sounds utopian and a little odd to me. I got to be honest, but you want to live in a world where it's not needed, but it's you don't want to live in a world where it's not available.
Yeah, we want it to be unthinkable, right? Like we want it to be we want the humanity of the preborn to be recognized.
But you don't want it to be restricted such that it's not available.
I don't like. Again, the premise is like way off, right?
It's one has one difference. You know, we live in a pluralistic society, and you've got
but like you and I
factors
are coming at it. But you and I are coming at it from the completely opposite. Like the terminology doesn't even match, right? Like if the preborn, the humanity of the preborn, human rights extend to the human family, human rights extend to the human being, right? That's where we start. What does that look like? Right?
But there are two ways of thinking about it. You could say it's a personal choice, and I disagree with, but I acknowledge the right of people to make their choice. Or you can take a firmer view and to say, this is, I think at one point you had said, abortion is the greatest human rights tragedy of our time. And if that's the case, then you maybe take a firmer view and you say there ought to be rules.
Yeah. I hope for the day when abortion is unthinkable.
And do you, what was the reaction? I mean, it's a big tent party you are in. Not you live with libertarians like Scott Reed. There are social conservatives like yourself, and yours. It's not an accusation. I've heard you self-describe as a social conservative. When Roe v. Wade was struck down by the U.S. Supreme Court, and you immediately sort of did a video to say it feels so good to have a win. We've been praying for this for a very long time. This is history in the making. Did you get blowback from your own colleagues, or is there enough of a team there that you felt support from colleagues?
Yeah, we are a big tent party. I feel like I'm a valued member of the team. I'm happy to contribute when and where I'm needed, and yeah, that's.
So I won't dwell on it overall, but so what would be an example when you introduced the petition and you've just called for signatures outside of the House of Commons at this pro-life, anti-choice, however you describe it one way, I'll describe it the other. But when you call for signatures to the petition and then you enter into the House of Commons and you say, this is a call to strengthen protections for the preborn in Canada. What strengthened protections do you want?
Well, I guess first of all, your timing, the timing is off. Like I've presented that petition 19 times. This isn't the first time that I've presented. Like I present a lot of petitions.
Yeah.
So that it's.
But that may be, but maybe that's even better because you've introduced this petition or a similar language 19 times. You must surely know what you mean then. So what does it mean if you've said it 19 times? What does it mean to strengthen protections for the preborn in Canada?
Well, there would be a recognition of their humanity, right? And then where does that flow from there, right?
Where does it flow? How does the law change?
We are the only country in the world with no preborn protected rights, right? That's like if you go to Europe, it's dramatically different, right? Extremely. Countries that like Holland, Switzerland, like our peer countries in Europe, view and deal with it dramatically differently.
Now,
So
I can't
I would
imagine
say,
that. I can't imagine the Netherlands is a country you would point to for inspiration, given you've called Canada a country. I think a government of what is it? A government of death or something. So,
yeah.
and Netherlands is along the same lines, with assisted dying and everything else. Is there? I think more reasonably, from if you're coming at
Well,
it from a more biblical perspective, is there an
yeah.
American jurisdiction that you look to and say that state has the law right?
So I'm of Dutch heritage. I don't know if you knew that, but so my grandparents are all from
Yeah,
Holland.
yeah, yeah. I knew. Yeah.
So I probably have more affinity for Holland than I do for any American state, so to speak, right? And I often point out that even Holland thinks Canada's crazy on these issues, particularly on the euthanasia issue, right? Like, and they led the world, right? Like, it's an interesting.
Their laws are more accommodating than ours for things like mental illness, though. So
Yeah.
I would question and debate that in a serious way. But but I would have thought, you're celebrating the end of Roe v. Wade, and you do come at this from a more biblical perspective and a more social conservative perspective. And when I think of jurisdictions that accommodate that, they're American states, and when you're looking to Roe v. Wade and the overturning of that, you must think, wouldn't it be great if, we've prayed for so long, wouldn't it be great if we overturned Morgentaler?
Yeah, it looks completely different in Canada. Morgentaler has created a legal void, right? We just don't have no law in Canada.
We have medical regulate, like the medical profession regulates this in a serious way. It's not just this isn't like it's not as if people aren't receiving counseling. It's not as if people aren't having physicians that are acting as physicians in the best interests of the women who are coming to them. Do you?
Well,
I know you want it to be unthinkable, but you don't want it to be. I think I take your point. You want it to be available still.
You and I are going to disagree on this one for a long time, right?
Yeah, fair.
Like,
if you're gonna convince interesting.
Yeah.
I don't want to convince you. I just find it interesting, but I know why. It's a difficult thing to navigate in our politics. It's just interesting to me. You speak at a pro-life rally. You introduce petitions. You're quite vocal at times, but there is still a real hesitation. It's a real hesitation. You're very critical of Roe v. Wade and celebrating that, but less willing to be so critical of Morgentaler. I mean, it is interesting, and probably because you see the politics in front of you and you say, this is such an uphill battle, and my caucus, this is going to be maybe a nightmare for my caucus if I'm too vocal on this.
So the reality is that I work on a host of issues, and some I make more progress on than others, and I'm excited to work with guys like you on things that we can make progress on, and the ethics.
Well, I sincerely hope we don't make progress on rolling back a woman's right to choose.
Yeah, well, that's
so
like we're ships in the night on that, because it's like the terminology and the fundamental starting point on that. We started opposite ends of the world on that, so to speak. So.
Yeah, whereas even if I accepted that sort of so-called life begins at the moment of conception, I would still say rights compete all of the time. They collide all of the time. And in that particular instance, a woman's right to choose dominates. That, it's not even a question in my mind. And so, I mean, it's an interesting thing to, I don't acknowledge that life begins at the moment of conception, but even if I did, I would say a woman's right to choose is the end of the matter. It's okay. We don't have to keep going. Okay, so on a more lighthearted note, why do you even try to rap?
So, why do I even try to rap? So that was that was quite a bit of fun, actually. So that was my first political convention, and they had a bunch
of my first political convention. I'm gonna do a YouTube rap video.
Yeah. So So the folks that were organizing it, they said, "Hey guys, we've got a bunch of time in the middle of the afternoon that we need to fill, and so we need some content, right?" And so that was it was intended to be a fun joke, essentially. So people, I know I can't rap. Right, like
Marilyn Gladu wore a hood. I get it. It was a weird time to be a conservative.
A weird time. I thought it was kind of fun,
but it's not the only time you've engaged in some poetry. So
ChatGPT has made it a lot easier. I'll have to admit.
You did am I right to say? This is my memory of things. You did a anti-carbon tax poem or rhyme of some sort.
John Oliver.
And last week tonight, John Oliver dunked on you pretty hard. Because I remember, I don't know if it was the next day or the next week or whatever, but I came up to you and I was like, "Did you know who John Oliver was before he did the bit?" And you're like, "No."
Didn't know who he was. The other one, the one I'm much more proud of is my pipes for oil. So I did like a spoof off of the 420.
Okay,
yeah, and that one I was way more proud of that one. It went pretty viral on Facebook, YouTube, but yeah, John Oliver didn't pick it up
for good reasons or bad reasons. Because you've never consumed you've never consumed cannabis though, have you?
No.
Okay, so I promise you, if you consume cannabis, your poems about cannabis will be much better.
Well, it wasn't about cannabis; it was about pipes for oil. But for 20 years or more, oil has safely passed. So we need pipes.
In fact, if it wasn't you, no, I was thinking of Marilyn Gladu, who recently joined me as well. But she'd done an anti-pot poem. Your poems were anti-carbon tax, the sort of the rap thing, and then and then a pipeline one. But I will say, if you want the rhyme to flow better, definitely cannabis will help.
Thanks. I think that it sounds better in your own head. That's all.
This is, I think, a nice story, and you came to politics. I think it was ARPA Canada that really helped you find your way into politics, and that's that is a religious organization, and you've carved out some space to maintain your voice and bring some of that biblical view into Parliament. But your grade 7 teacher who tried to teach you French and said you might need it in Parliament someday. Tell me that story.
Yeah, so I was like, I didn't like taking French in school. I guess there was a bunch of things about school I didn't like, but I wanted to be an auto mechanic, and that's what I did. And I said, teach me Dutch because that would be actually useful in our community. But learning this French, like, what's the point of this? And he said, well, Arnold, you might work in the Parliament buildings one day. And I said, oh, fat chance of that happening. And I was pretty good friends with his son. And so, we knew each other outside at school. He moved away to South Africa, maybe 10 years ago or 15 years ago, I guess. Anyways, he came back a couple of years after I was elected, walked in my office, and he said, fat chance of that happening, huh, Arnold? So he must have seen something I didn't see. But I still don't know any French, though. But I do represent large French communities, however. So. It would be helpful.
Well, we do have there are lessons you can take in Parliament.
Yeah,
they're actually great. You do one-on-one lessons.
I have started them several times. Yeah.
Best of intentions, best laid plans.
Yes.
You are running again. Do you find it difficult? I mentioned the Big Ten party. I'm in a big tent party too, and I've not always agreed, and I've been public in my disagreement at times.
Yeah.
You have a leader who talks about making Canada the freest country in the world, and that it strikes a very libertarian tone, and that is very different from social conservatism. And how do you navigate that, given your values, the values of the community that you represent, and your own religious faith, and that there's conflict there as between conservative views?
Yeah, I don't actually think that there's a lot of conflict between that. Like, for the most part, we there's a 99% alignment on that. We want to keep our money and be left alone. That's I essentially perhaps we have as social conservatives, we have a more positive outlook on humanity, I would say, maybe, or like we think of, I like to say we think of humanity as being cultivated, and so there's something to that. If you want to make the analogy to an orchard, I always say, like, the left wants the fruit without the trees, and libertarians want the trees without an orchard. Right? There's some cultivation that humanity needs to take place. And so I say, but for the most part, I would say that we coexist very tidily and handily as social conservatives and libertarians.
Except on social issues. So sure, up to a point.
Yeah.
But when you say you want government to leave you alone, right? You take drug policy as an example. And this is where Pierre ditches his libertarian leanings. But everything you just express about a cultural perspective instead of a legal restriction around pornography. When there are social harms to something, and there are obviously potential harms associated with different substances, depending upon the substance, of course, but alcohol, there are real harms. We don't criminalize it. There are social harms associated with MDMA. We do criminalize that. And there are social harms associated with cannabis, and we've thankfully moved away from the criminalization of that. But a social conservative perspective might have said, no, I don't want to legalize cannabis. A social conservative perspective might have said, yeah, government's going to leave me alone, but not allow gay marriage, or not allow abortion, or not allow for the same fullness of transgender rights. And so, I mean, the government leaves you alone, but they don't leave all people alone, right? In a social conservative perspective.
Yeah. To this point, I haven't found there to be a conflict in that. And I'm happy to give my full-throated support to Pierre. Like, I think we're on the right track.
Yeah. Well, that's the nature of a Big Tent party. But it is, I have my disagreements too, and you do try and navigate different ways to get things done and to build coalitions in caucus and to change things. But, so a certain brand of social conservatism, I mean, take gay marriage. And if you were in Parliament back in the early 2000s, there were liberals who were speaking out against gay marriage, right? There were overwhelmingly conservatives speaking out against gay marriage. You would have been... Social conservatism lived in the Conservative Party to a great degree, and to the Liberal Party to some degree as well. We don't have that same social conservatism that is as mainstream of a view, and so you are a much smaller, a much smaller voice as a social conservative in that caucus than maybe you used to be. And there you are trying to build coalitions and build it back up potentially. I don't know.
Yeah. Yes. Maybe. It's interesting to listen to your perceptions on this a little bit. I guess it's not like it's maybe less divided than it's less clear cut, I think, is what it is. Like the caucus is on a spectrum on pretty much every issue, right? So you're you depending on the issue, I don't feel really siloed. Like I'm happy to wear the social conservative.
Right. And maybe there are more social conservatives than I'm giving credit for.
Yeah.
Maybe there are more in that caucus. I don't know.
Yeah, that I would like it's not a lonely fight, I suppose.
Yeah, I got you. There are more than I'm anticipating. I'm not in that caucus, and so there are more. It's a stronger voice than I appreciate, maybe. And so so quick hits. Gay marriage is well behind us. If there's a vote on that, you're voting for gay marriage.
For gay marriage. Well, there's no vote on that. It's purely hypothetical.
Yeah, no. But just quick. It's like the history of social conservatism. So if there's a vote on gay marriage, up or down?
I vote gay marriage down. That's like
okay. If we're voting to overturn Morgentaler, you're voting yay or nay?
Yeah, I don't even think that's a thing, but I would vote to reverse. Well, not I wouldn't vote to reverse Morgentaler. I would vote like that's. It's not.
I don't know. That's a tough one for a social conservative. It's a hard one. It's a hard one.
Like introduce. So yeah, no, that one's like it's not a vote. It will never be a vote. Like that's like there will be a piece of legislation that comes forward that will answer Morgentaler. And I will...
but hang on. Morgentaler struck down certain restrictions, right? So the idea behind Morgentaler was it wasn't a blanket ban, but there were so many different procedural hurdles in the way that effectively restrained rights so much that it was an effective prohibition. And so the court struck it down for a myriad of reasons. But Bertha Wilson she didn't write for any majority because there were concurring opinions in that. But Bertha Wilson has won the day. And when you read her decision today, it would be the majority decision of any court today. And so if you are to reform Morgentaler, you would be reversing Bertha Wilson's view of things, which is a developmental view of the fetus, which is not moment of conception, which is certainly prioritizing a woman's right to choose.
So if they pick a line, they introduce a piece of legislation, and they pick a line, I vote for that. I vote for that bill.
And if the line is moment of conception, you vote for that bill.
I'm 100% pro-life, so yeah.
Okay, and I vote for the on parental rights. So what you follow the story in? I think you introduced a petition on this around New Brunswick, and on I think maybe I read this wrong. I don't want to misquote it, but is there a view of like washroom access? Are we going to redebate that stuff as well around washroom access for trans people? I saw Pierre say something along those lines, and I was like, I must have read that wrong because that can't possibly be the case.
Well, so I'm supportive of Danielle Smith's position. But again, most of that stuff's like Pierre says, most of that debate is provincial jurisdiction, right?
Yeah, although the protection of trans people and gender expression within Canadian human rights legislation is federal. That was a source of consternation for conservatives, but I didn't get the sense that they wanted to revisit that. But you were yay or nay?
I'm a nay, I guess.
A nay on that one, yeah. Well, consistently socially conservative. So yes. there is a consistency to it.
I don't know why the quick hits are, because it's like I'm going to be
because sometimes we can like talk about it, but then if brass tacks, it comes down to a vote. Some people will in politics make an eloquent case for something, but if it comes down to a vote, they're like, I don't know actually.
Well, I guess like I'm kind of doing the I don't know thing, because it's like I'm going to look at the bill. Like it's going to be a bill, and it's probably not going to be 100% anything, right? They never are. You've experienced this as well, right? It's like this is the bill. We're doing the Liberals love to do this. We're doing the most best thing. Here's our housing plan. Here's our housing plan, and it just says I'm like, yeah, you're right. It says housing plan on the top. It's a blank piece of paper below that, but sure, like, right? That's the piece of legislation is always like, okay, I will vote yes or no like these are the things I'm pursuing, but you never get that in the vote.
Well,
right?
Well, we did get it. So here's one that is more personal for me because I have Crohn's. I don't drink very much. I do occasionally consume cannabis, which isn't as hard on me as far as it goes. And I joke that I was a criminal before I got elected, and then I got elected, I changed the law, and I'm not a criminal anymore. And if there was a vote to recriminalize cannabis, are you going to make me a criminal again?
Again, what's the bill?
Say it ain't so, Arnold. Say it ain't so.
Yeah. Your predictions are correct.
Oh, no. Oh, all right. Well, I'm happy to work with you on addressing exploitation online and on pornography sites, but you might not have my vote otherwise.
Well, that's what I said. I had 12 things on the list. I picked probably the only one.
That's good. That's good. Well, you are a good sport, if nothing else. I don't have the audience that John Oliver has, by the way, so you're safe from too many eyeballs. And what is the next poem? What is your next poem?
Oh, I've handed that off. Our new rap laureate is Ryan Williams.
Oh, yes, I've seen that too. Yes.
Yeah. So
yes, I have seen that.
I've passed the torch. I've said, Ryan, you're the new.
The abject embarrassment gets passed along to someone else.
You're the new. His production quality is way better.
I saw he did one on where it was like a walking to camera thing. It was yeah.
We'll have to have him on next.
Yeah, exactly. I forget. I was on I think the industry committee with him. I quite enjoy committee because it is an opportunity to sort of put our differences aside and work towards some common goal. I've experienced it not only on the ethics committee with you, but on the ethics committee previously when the Cambridge Analytica scandal had happened. I've experienced it on the industry committee when we hauled the grocery executives in when they cut pandemic pay premiums. There are moments in time where you can play a real accountability function and coalesce around an issue across party lines and actually make legislative change.
Yeah. So.
Well, I appreciate the time,
Nate.
Arnold.
I'm going to bed.
Well, you're a good sport, and I appreciate you joining me.
Later.
Take care.
Thanks for joining me on this episode of Uncommons. I don't want to dwell on this. You've now heard it, and you'll have come to your own conclusions, I'm sure, as to whether I ambushed Arnold or not. But it should be fair game if a parliamentarian has spoken about a subject, has introduced a petition on a subject, has a history of advocacy on a subject. I mean, we're talking about a petition that was tabled less than a month ago. Surely that is fair game. We talked about C-270 for half of the conversation, practically. So I don't think it is fair to send questions in advance, limit ourselves to certain topics. We're parliamentarians. We should be open to debate, especially open to debate on issues that we are passionate about. I mean, if you ask me about my personal beliefs around animal welfare and veganism, and you ask me, Nate, would you ban meat? Would you introduce a bill or vote for a bill to ban meat? I would say no. That is a ridiculous idea, and I'm happy to have the conversation, but that part of the conversation is ridiculous. Should we strengthen animal welfare? Of course we should, but I'm not in the business of banning meat, no matter what some conservatives would have you believe. I don't know why we can't have that same conversation with social conservatives. If they believe strongly in something, we should have the debate, and they should be able to articulate and be proud of their views, actually. They should be able to articulate their views and be proud of them. Now, the second thing I want to say is we're going to have the Prime Minister on this podcast at some point in the coming weeks and months. Should I send him questions in advance? Should I send him topics in advance? Should I limit myself to certain topics that I've cleared in advance with him? Of course not. Of course not. I'm not going to do that either. I've had guests from a range of different parties and experts and people of different views, and that's why we host this show, to have, I hope, at times, a thoughtful conversation about a range of different views. Now, if you want certain topics, or if you want certain guests on this podcast, I hope Arnold isn't the last conservative guest. Email me info@beynate.ca. If you think I ambushed Arnold and you want to give me an earful, you can email me that as well. And otherwise, you can reach me on social media, of course, at beynate. And otherwise, until next time.